Hello, everyone. Welcome to Not Your Average Goat. This is a show that celebrates all the shapes, sizes, and colors of diversity as well as adversity, while creating a space for authentic and vulnerable conversations that hopefully you find to be meaningful and relatable. Through these conversations, my guests and I hope to have an impact on dismantling deeply ingrained stigma and prejudice. I'm so excited you are here and that we're finally recording this. I think we had our first conversation about the podcast maybe a little over a year ago. And so I'm over the moon to have you here.
Oh, I'm excited to be a part of this and so honored that you will even ask me to do something like this. So thank you for, acknowledging and being able to appreciate my perspective.
Absolutely. So we actually met about 8 years ago, which seems incredible.
8 years, almost a decade.
Almost a decade.
I know.
We both were at the same nonprofit organization. I remember we were kind of put into the same cohort of new employees, and we had to create that crazy video. Do you remember that video?
Oh, gosh. Everyone's just so creative. I do remember it. Good memories, funny memories for sure. That was a good cohort, good people.
I really think we took that organization to the next level.
I have to say we did. We brought in a new millennial perspective. We were like the Powerpuff Girls.
But I remember, so you were part of the Economic Security Center. So can you remind me what exactly you were working on while you were there?
Yeah, so what we did was we managed, I believe it was a $2.4 million grant provided through federal funding. And what we did was we utilized those funds to create and support and develop community organizations, whether on a federal, state, or nonprofit level. And what we did was we provided those funds to those organizations so that they can utilize those sources in-house to do outreach and assist older adults and people with disabilities to enroll in services that they are entitled to. So we're talking about whether it's HUD housing or EBT food stamp assistance, or even assisting with helping them find reasonable housing accommodations so that they can continue to grow older within their community.
You've done a lot of work helping older adults as well as the younger generations as well. And I'd love to dive in more to that in just a bit. But one thing I love to do with everyone who comes on the show, Katrina, is actually kind of like time travel a bit. So I'd love to know, thinking back on yourself around 7, 8 years old, tell me about who you were back then.
So I have always been a person that had a soft spot in my heart for just human nature, humankind, and animals, right? So 8-year-old, 10-year-old Katrina was always fascinated with learning more about nature, animal systems, whether it's biological systems, chemical systems, mechanical or engineering systems. I was just very fascinated with learning more about how things work and also how to navigate, and also understanding the ethos or the development or the creation of anything, right? So I've always been always eager to learn, always eager to get hands-on, So I've always been volunteering. And the fact that, you said I've done a lot of work with older adults. I have been volunteering at nursing homes and veteran centers since the age of 8, 10. I'm a child of veterans. So veterans and older adults have always been a part of me and a part of my life, and definitely promoted me to go into the field of studies and profession that I have chose to go into.
That's incredible. And I could definitely see you doing that. And it really explains a lot of your your personalities and I think some of the personal values that you really developed and brought with you into your adulthood. So that's so incredible. And so I admire that a lot because a lot of 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, their parents say, we're going to go volunteer. We're going to go hang out with, older people. And they're like, no, I don't, I want to go ride my bike, mom and dad. I don't want to do that.
I love the nursing home. Why? Because everything is inclusive. It's like going to a resort. Food there, games there, bed there, TV there, shuffleboard. Oh, now you're teasing me. I have always had a oh soul. So I want to be where life is easy. And it's nice that, I felt so comfortable in a spot where if I have a medical emergency, look, nurses on deck. I just felt safe. And so I feel like oftentimes growing old is seen as a disability or a handicap or a decline. When I think that growing old means you get to retire, you can live life and enjoy it. So why not make it a little bit easier? And so I've always felt the need to advocate to make life just a little bit easier because people have lived so hard and worked so hard. They deserve, and they've worked to live and age peacefully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I really cherish the work that I was able to do at the organization that we used to work at. I felt so rewarded. And I think for me, I was still in my 20s at the time. I think for me, working there, I felt like I was getting prepared. I was learning so much about things I need to keep an eye out for when I do get older, like falls and chronic conditions and all of the different things and all the different resources that are available to you if for some reason your situation changes throughout life. You, as a child, kind of self-described as a loner, and you said that you were really advanced in maturity compared to your peers. Can you tell me more about this? Why did you experience life in this way back then?
Now that I'm older, I look back at it. And like I said prior in this conversation, I've always been an old soul, right? And I think there's something very special about that intergenerational relationship between the young and the old. There's been conversations that I've had with older adults in my youth that prepared me for the tasks and tribulations of growing. For me at a young age, I've always felt like having conversations with my peers were just burdensome, worrisome, and stressful. And like I said, I was in those environments where I felt comfortable and safe. And sometimes amongst my own peers, I did not feel that. Being amongst older people, having those conversations that with them, I've just always had a much mature way of processing life. When I was amongst my peers, there was just so much noise, so much rowdiness, so much loudness, so much chaos. I would just shut down, similar to what I still do to this day. Like anytime I feel overwhelmed, stressed out, I shut down. I have that quiet time so I can process life around me because it's chaotic, right? So oftentimes amongst my peers, I would just be a loner. I would keep to myself. I didn't want that stress. Oftentimes when I'm amongst my peers, it was in a school setting. So I will often sit by myself, sit in the front of the class, stay focused because I'm there to do a job and that's to learn. And then outside of school, I was around people much older than me. I grew up in the church, so I was around older people all the time. I had very involved grandparents, so I would spend the weekends with them sometimes and extended periods of times. I'm the second oldest of the grandchildren. So I spent a lot of time around older people. So there's a lot, I was always in old people business, as they say. So for me being around people in my peers, it just felt just out of place, right? So oftentimes in places where you don't feel comfortable, it's best just to be quiet and observant. And that's what I've often found myself doing because there's so much peace and silence and so much chaos and noise.
I can definitely relate to a lot of what you were just talking about. I too have always been very quiet, pretty reserved. I would be the person sitting at the front of the classroom, paying attention. I was definitely a very big nerd when it came to school. And I also had a lot of social anxiety as well. So just hanging out with, big crowds of people, or even like participating in like recess and things like that gave me a lot of anxiety. So I would oftentimes kind of be off by myself as well. And I'm also the oldest too. So not just the oldest of my siblings, but I'm the oldest of all grandchildren and cousins. And so when, we had big, like Thanksgiving dinners or just family gatherings, they would have the adult table and the kids table. And I would somehow be able to kind of talk myself into sitting at the adult table.
I was always the floater. I was floating between the adult table and the children's table because I was nosy, but also show face, right? That's one thing that we had to learn a lot as adults, especially with the organization that we worked with in the events that we held. You have to show your face, right? You have to show your face. And I understand not everyone has a childhood like that. But again, something is important to say about birth order, but also those that you keep around you. And at a young age, I learned that that was very important as well. It's very important who you keep around you and who you allow into your space. And loneliness is not a burden. Loneliness is not a negative. Loneliness is important for growth, maturity, and understanding. But a lot of people feel uncomfortable in their loneliness, and a lot of people experience longingness in their loneliness. And being older children and waiting for others to come, you had to have a lot of loneliness. It was 5 years before my parents had my sister. So I had 5 years of loneliness, of peace, of quiet, of introspection. I have a dog and a cat, and I started out with the cat, and my cat is a female. My dog is a boy. And, she was so peaceful when she was just by herself. She still finds her peace to have the loneliness, but I could see how it could be chaotic for her. So I think oftentimes it's just very natural, right? But it's also very important to enjoy your loneliness and find peace in it.
So you grew up in Michigan. You were part of a stationary military family. What do you remember most about your home life?
Very structured. You had to be up by 6:40 a.m. You had to be dressed and ready by 7:10. You have to be packed and fed by 7:30 because by 7:40 we are on the road. And there's just two of us. We're on the road. We're en route to school. You get your mind right because school is for work. Work is your school, and you're going to be focused. Your pay is your grades because it's going to pay off in the long run. So you stay focused, you stay zoned in, and you stay open-minded so that you can learn, right? And you have to be ready by 2:48 because that's the time that you will be picked up. You have 5 minutes to get to the car. We're leaving. And we're en route home, So very structured, very coordinated. You have time to eat. You have time to wind down. You have time to do your homework. You have time to go to sleep and do it over again. This is 5 days a week. On the weekends, do you get to rest? Absolutely not, because we're waking up. You're going to be up by 9 o'clock a.m. You can sleep in a little bit longer if you want to because it's the weekend. But you're going to wake up. You're going to clean. You have a list of extracurricular activities to do. You're going to study. You're going to go to the library. You're going to read a book. You're going to write a report. Very structured. You're at bed by 10 p.m. because you get to stay up 1 hour later. But you got to be up because we got to be up by 7 o'clock on Sunday because we have to go to church and we have to praise the Lord. So very, very structured. It had to be structured because I would have so many interests. Growing up, I always was in a sport. I was learning instruments. I was doing camp, or I was in college courses, some type of community enriching group or social group, always staying active, always staying busy, always doing better. That's how I would describe my childhood. But it also makes me who I am to this day. And I noticed that a lot of people probably did not grow up with so much routine. Sometimes it's hard for people to understand, but I'm that adult that's like, I gotta leave by 8:30 because I'm gonna be in the bed by 9. Right. That's still my bedtime to this day, and I'm 33 years old.
I think structure and routine are things that are really underestimated and taken for granted sometimes. I did not have that in my life growing up. And so all the structure and routine that I have today, I had to teach myself. And I'm very thankful that I'm a very disciplined person. As a Capricorn, I'm equally stubborn, but also very disciplined. So you said that oftentimes you felt like you had to assume the role of second in command. You're the oldest of two children, and sometimes, parental figures weren't always there.
So, as a millennial, being a child, the last of the 80s babies and a child of the 90s, I was a latchkey kid. I was also the oldest. My sister is 5 years younger than me. I'm a true millennial, and she's a younger millennial, right? 1989 and 1994. So at the age of 5, I was still helpful, right? Always help mom. And also at the age of 5, my dad was recuperating from a traumatic brain injury. And my mom was the sole primary caregiver and breadwinner at that time, as my dad was discharged from service, had the TBI, and had to learn everything all over again. So not only did my mother have a 5-year-old, but she also had an infant, newborn, and a disabled husband. And she was working 2 jobs. So for me, also being the oldest in the family, I will help. You need the bottle warmed up, I will help. You need somebody to hold the baby, I will help. You know, you want me to sit down and watch her and we watch TV together, you need me to play with her, I will help. So even though I was the oldest sister and this is my younger sister, I also felt like second in command. Can you take out the trash? Can you wash the dishes? But also at the age of 5, those are also very important developmental skills, teaching them tactile and chores and things of that nature. So yeah, I always felt second in command, but also I felt like I was capable of assisting in those duties.
So, Katrina, for you growing up as a Black female and being part of a Black family, and especially in Michigan, during the 90s, do you remember anything that really stands out to you?
As a Black child in America in the 90s, it was something that when I think of good times, I think of those moments. It was very culturally influenced. I remember growing up and going to a lot of kickbacks, I guess that's what they call it now, kickbacks or African festivals, actually enjoying my childhood, being around people that look like me, but also growing up in the 90s, especially the early 90s, we were exposed prematurely to a lot of police brutality, and having it be 2, 3 decades later, and it's still the police brutality, it just lets you know that some things just never change and oftentimes intensifies over time. We have been in war since we've been alive. So that has also been an impact in my life, especially as a child of the 90s, because you continue to see these wars and this distress and the impact that it has on society. And I think that that's both something that can be experienced amongst all cultures or anyone within our generation. But for Black children, hits a little bit tougher to home when you see so much injustices happening towards people that look like you.
It's really hard to see injustices happening to anyone, but especially people who look like you, because then you start to wonder, when is it going to be my turn?
Yeah, or when is it going to be over?
When is it going to be over? Yeah. And we've had so many, we think of wars of kind of these grand scheme international things, but there's really been wars going on within our own country for our entire lives as well.
for those, especially children of the 90s, right? We grew up with Captain Planet, Care Bears, Barney, Life is Love and Love is Life, or the Ninja Turtles, always fight for what's right. And then you live this life and it's like, it's everything but that. It's very hard. And I think it's definitely a reality check, but also it could be motivating at the same time. I noticed that a lot of us within this generation or within this socioeconomic class or within this racial cultural group, a lot of us find the need to be impactful some way, somehow, whether it's professionally or even through our daily personal lives, and I think that's very important to instill in people because times are very distressful and there's not much hope, but there's hope in the impact that you can make. You just have to figure out how to make that impact.
I'm trying to, use this podcast as a way of having some kind of impact and break down judgment barriers and stigmas and bring more attention to these difficult conversations like the one we're having. And so I really value trying to make an impact in some way. And I think sometimes it can feel overwhelming and it can feel futile sometimes to even try. But if we all just tried, we could do incredible things. You've always been immensely passionate about human welfare, LGBTQI rights, disability rights. As humans, we should all honestly be super passionate about these things too. But I'm curious, how did you actually develop this interest in, really wanting to be in this space? Where did this all start for you?
Being in close proximity relation, having people that I love that identify with these communities or are impacted by any type of limitations that society has made on them. Seeing people that you love struggle will definitely light a fire in you. And it's so much to talk about it, but it's even more to be about it. So for me, this is the greatest gift I could give to the people that I love, but not only to the people that I love, but to everybody that's deserving of it. So I'm going to go to school because I have the will, the structure, the ability to focus and understand how impactful my research and my knowledge of this particular topic can be. So I could change the lives of those around me and those that I love. So it's always been a passion of me, for me. And who's not passionate about human rights? We're all human, right?
You have a personal mission of being able to impact the hometown that shaped you. Can you tell me more about the vision and dream you have for that?
I am from a small town in Michigan. It's called Saginaw, Michigan. Oftentimes people call it Sag Nasty. So I come from a small industrial town. It was greatly impacted by the automotive industry in the early 2000s. A lot of the automotive industries were outsourced. So a lot of people lost their job. So I come from a community that has been impacted by a loss of jobs, loss of income, loss of resources, increase in violence, right? So for me, if I am ever able to impact my community, I will, whether it's giving back to community resources that provide funding for students and children that would like to advance their careers or advance their education, I am all for it. It would be my dream to open a nonprofit within my community to provide those resources to those children that have bigger dreams that others may see are bigger than them, because everyone needs that outlet. Everyone needs the opportunity to explore their dreams, regardless of their resources or the community that they come from.
Autism Speaks is an organization that works to achieve a world where all people with autism across the spectrum and throughout the lifespan can achieve their full potential, inclusive of race, ethnicity, age, ability, gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, or belief system. Learn more at autismspeaks.org. in September of 2022, you were finally properly diagnosed with a disability after years and years and years of kind of misdiagnosis and improper treatment. Can you take me back just a bit, kind of, when your disability was still unknown, what were some of kind of like the symptoms that either you or like your family started to notice when you were growing up?
For me, change has always been difficult. Any major life change would cause me to pretty much crumble and become almost incapacitated, which is very sad because if you go to a new school or you graduate or you start a new educational journey or you start a new job or you physically move from one location to another, it should not cause you great distress, right? But for me, it always caused me great distress. I was always like I self identify as a loner. My loneliness is peace and it's quiet. When I'm in chaotic situation, huge crowds, loud noises, strong smells, bright lights, it will cause me to have an issue, you know. And growing up, they did try to diagnose me with epilepsy because of it, because my body system will react in that way. And it came out to be diagnosed as psychosomatic seizures, right? My body would just be so overwhelmed that it was shut down, you know. I always had issues with um, regulating my own body temperature, so extreme heats would cause me to have issues, right? I was highly susceptible to heat stroke in the summers, susceptible to pneumonia in the springs and the falls. Why does Katrina fall so ill during these times? And then you think about growing up, what happens during those seasonal changes. You're out of school, you're changing, you're growing, you're moving from one school to another. There's changes that's happening. There's relationship bonds that are changing or being separated or drifted away, you know. In school, I always did very well, but when it came to real life, it was, and still to this day, continues to be a struggle, you know? And it's like, why is everything so difficult for me? Everything is so difficult. Why? You know? And oftentimes when I get overwhelmed, I just shut down. I will not talk because I can't talk to people because I feel like they do not understand. Right. So I would just shut down and I call it my mute mode. Like when my family or friends try to contact me, oh, Katrina's not responding back. She must be on mute mode. There's no talking. And I could go no talking for 3, 6, 9 months. And for me, that's perfectly fine. But for other people, they're like, well, something is wrong. What is going on? I'm overwhelmed. I'm trying to process. And I can't make sense of life right now. I cannot be present, you know? So I started therapy in college and I continue therapy to this day. My therapist always said, you're very self-aware. Um, you have the capabilities, but somehow you diminish or you pull back. Why is that? And I'm like, because people don't receive me the way that I need to be received. They are not worthy of my attention or my interaction. Therefore, I say nothing, right? Or I only respond through text or email messages because that's the only way that I can vocalize myself and be heard. So, my therapist will always question me, well, why do you do this? Or break down what is going on in your head and just associate why your physical reactions are the result of whatever's going on emotionally and mentally. And I say, this is what goes on in my head, and this is how my body portrays it. And then my therapist was like, have you ever been diagnosed with autism? I said, no, but you know, when you think about all the characteristics, I guess I might fall on the spectrum. I wouldn't know because there's so many other barriers that come into place, such as being a woman, such as being Black, or being in certain social economic situations. And so there's a lot that comes into it. So I can understand why people say she's spazzing out, but not understanding that there's so much more to it. But no one will ever know because I would never communicate it. You know, I never felt the need to justify my actions, especially when my actions I felt were warranted for how I felt at that time. So over the years, a lot of doctors and mental health practitioners had a very hard time understanding, but a lot of them were not of the same cultural or ethnic background as me. They didn't understand the type of microaggressions that I would have to experience on a daily basis, or the situations or environmental factors that come into place. So it was just very difficult and very hard because to me, I knew that something was wrong, but I knew that it wasn't what other people are trying to diagnose me as. And then all of a sudden, I decided to become a behavioral specialist for autistic children and youth. And while taking those courses to get my certification to work with this vulnerable population, I just started putting two and two together and three together, and it's coming out to a whole number and it's making sense to me. And I would talk about it with my therapist, and my therapist was like, okay, maybe you should go and see a psychologist. Maybe you should go see a psychiatrist, and maybe you should also see your PCP. You need to get your support team strong when it comes to your medical diagnosis because I think you might be autistic. And I was like, no, not me. They're like, yeah, you. So it was an interesting journey, interesting experience. For me, it just kind of confirmed that I am weird, but my weirdness is justified. I can't help who I am. This is who I am, but it's also been very hard to come to terms with it because people still stigmatize autism.
So when we think about stigma, it usually stems from having stereotypes and generalizations and misconceptions about what something actually is. Do you feel like there are some important myths or misconceptions about autism that are important to address with people?
I think a lot of people feel that and people that are autistic cannot learn, that they are dumb. These are very harsh words to say. And or also saying you have a disability, you're disabled. I'm a person that is surviving and working through this disability. I have deficits, but still I am held at the same level as a typical person. So this is a whole erasure of who I am. So I feel like people need to be cognizant of the terms, language, and the tone in which they use to identify people, and to further do research and educate themselves, and not come from a place of disadvantage or deficit, but come from a place of strength. When people speak on children or adults that are autistic, I think that they need to think more about how their words can be impactful and how they may be received by the person in which they are talking about and talking with. For me, I think the biggest change is being more deliberate with advocating for myself. These last couple of months, I have really had to exercise my vocal abilities, which is hard. It's so hard. It's so hard for me to talk through what I'm feeling when it's often hard for me to identify how I'm feeling because it is also very physical for me as well. And here I go again. This is still a very sensitive topic for me. And sometimes I often have a hard time gathering the words to communicate how I feel. So for me, that has been one of my main focus in therapy is associating my physical or outward reactions towards what I'm feeling mentally or emotionally. So I have been very deliberate in actually breaking down and understanding my reactions, also more deliberate in advocating for myself and establishing those boundaries. For me, I am so used to people criticizing me or making me feel bad about how I choose to live my life because it's easier for me. And so for me, I have really had to come to terms that and just because I displease people doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. It's just I have to do what's best for me. So if I'm in a situation that's overwhelming or I have taken a position that I cannot execute because I'm having a hard time processing, then it's okay to communicate that. It's also good to establish boundaries and protocols so that I have defined definitions of what's expected of me and standing in that. So these last few months post diagnosis, I have been very deliberate in that. I have been feeling emotions that I'm not used to feeling. And it's been hard. I know it's been challenging for me, but it's also been challenging for those that choose to love me or care about me and support me.
I can definitely empathize with the situation. My husband last year was diagnosed for the first time as an adult with ADHD, and very different from autism. But it's been a journey over the last year, not just for him, but for me as well, really trying to understand what ADHD is, understand why he does different things and, how that impacts our relationship, and trying to really reconcile, this is the way things were for the first 13 years, and trying to figure out like, oh, that's why that happened, but also trying to kind of like separate the action from the intent, and now understanding that, there really was a reason behind why something happened, and it wasn't necessarily like a malice or like an irresponsible reason. And so I've been kind of going along on a different journey as well recently. But I'm so sorry that you've been experiencing shame for your lifestyle and how you're choosing to live. And I really hope that you do have, a support system around you right now. Some people there to help stand by you as you're trying to really figure out what your new normal is.
And for me, I guess it's not a new normal. It's just like a new addition, right? It's kind of like when you play a video game. Sometimes you unlock new skins, new avatars. That's what it feels like right now. The game of life. Okay, there's a new reboot. There's a new update to the system. I guess I'm up for the challenge. And that's how I've been seeing it, or that's how I've tried to see it through my life. It's not a limitation. It's just a new addition. And it's time to up the game. So it's just learning more about myself, but also understanding what needs to happen so that I could better assimilate to everybody else. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge with anybody when it comes to growth and development.
Hi, my wonderful goat friends. Firstly, thank you so much for your support and listening. If you're enjoying this conversation and other episodes of the podcast, I'd like to ask you to please give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you are listening on right now. And if you're so inclined, we love to hear your feedback in a full review. Also, might be a great idea to hit subscribe on that platform you're listening to right now so you can get notified of new episodes as they are released. Thank you so much again for being one of our loyal GOAT listeners. My podcast is called Not Your Average GOAT, GOAT standing for greatest of all time, and everyone I invite on this show are people who I think are quote unquote average people that the rest of the world should know about. I love to ask everyone who I bring on the show reflecting on your life and your journey, what for you has kind of been your GOAT?
I have always loved Oprah. I always loved, my mom, my aunt, my grandma always sit down and watch Oprah talk, call each other on the phone. Are you watching Oprah? Oprah was a staple in my household. Why? Because she came from very unfortunate circumstances. She's also a Baltimore, Maryland native. I was like, look at her. She defied odds. She chased her dreams. She's been a strategic and successful businesswoman, but she's also a creator. She's produced, she's written, she's supported other creatives. She also has great fashion sense. Come on. Oprah still looks great to this day. She loves animals, same as I. How is this not a phenomenal woman? How is she not? So she has always been a GOAT for me. Also, Tracy Ellis Ross. She comes from a diverse background, but she is also very impactful within the Black community and within a creative space. So she's definitely a GOAT for me. So I'm just impressed by these women, and I hope to aspire to them, and probably not at that level, but some way, somehow.
I think you can. I think you could be just as great, if not greater.
I hope so. But even if I'm not, I hope that the people that interact with me still appreciate me and what I have to bring to this world.
Not Your Average Goat is produced and edited by yours truly, with music by Sergey Quadrado and Anton Blazov. All content is copyrighted and should not be recreated, reproduced, or reused without explicit consent. Please visit notyouraveragegoat.org/contact for questions.